Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Today is a very special day for me because we are here with a guest who has participated in creating some of the most memorable items of entertainment in my childhood and beyond. But the topic is not me. The topic is Hollywood or objectivism in Hollywood. You know, everyone's waiting for a viral moment. Everyone's waiting for a dramatic revolution. But I think, the saying goes, the revolution will not be televised. I think we're going to see gradual changes in the culture as better thinkers, better ideas infiltrate the culture, largely via art and entertainment. Please leave us a super chat and please consider becoming an Ayn Rand Center UK member, especially right now, because Nikos is going to revive his Jocko Willink book study club if we get enough members by the end of the week. Please consider doing that. Help sustain this thing so we can grow, change the culture, and best of all, you can get great content. So I am here with, it is like Hollywood royalty. First off, we've got the co-host you know and love. This is the host of TV Talk here on YouTube. And catch this, he's actually on TV. Please welcome Mark Pellegrino.
What's up, Rucka?
Not much. Very excited. We have a guy who I just learned first of all, he's written for WWE, formerly WWF. That right there could be 3 episodes of its own. Also, he's written 2 movies, he's written 2 movies that I think really demonstrate why lying doesn't pay, why dishonesty doesn't pay off. One of them being Heartbreakers, starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, who that movie meant something to me as a lad. That's all I'll say on this family program. And of course, Jim Carrey's Liar Liar, which you can tell by the name is about a liar, but it really, I think, shows you why dishonesty doesn't work. And you don't need to argue with people about it. You can just show them why it doesn't work. And also, most exciting of all, this really has just been keeping me awake. The Little Rascals. Good Lord, buckwheat, alfalfa. I mean, we can do a full 3 hours just on the Little Rascals. But anyway, we're going to talk about objectivists in Hollywood. What's really going on behind the scenes? Please welcome Paul Guay.
Thank you for that incredibly warm and mostly true introduction. Well, you've got both the objectivists in Hollywood here, so.
All right, well.
Time to make a revolution, Paul.
That's right. This time it'll be streamed.
I hope we're never in a car together. If it crashes, that's the end of it. So is that really true though? Are the 2 of you really the only I know we've got, Jax and Jennifer who are working on the Strike TV show. They're in showbiz as well. What would you say there is any more presence of either objectivist sympathetic or just straight up objectivist people with prominence in Hollywood?
Well, as Mark knows, there's a secret handshake, and it's the only way we can recognize each other. It's unusual because you don't go into most meetings starting out with who is John Galt, or you don't necessarily lead with your politics every single time you walk into the lion's den. I haven't encountered anybody else who is a capital O or small o objectivist. There are a number of people I know who are libertarian or libertarian leaning, who are anti-authoritarian, which for me is fantastic. But I should shut up and let Mark talk.
Mark?
No, I agree. I've found the same dearth of objectivists in Hollywood. I've found a lot of people who respect Rand's work, and those tend to be the ones who lean libertarian. A great deal of others who don't understand her work, haven't really delved into it, and just sort of absorb the zeitgeist and then vomit that out. But certainly, I think the greater proportion of actors, at least, they're not taught in their classes, in their acting classes, that thinking is a virtue. In fact, they're taught to lead with their guts and their emotions, and that's the way they should discover and understand the world. And that becomes a habitual way of functioning. And I think it keeps actors in a permanent state of emotional regression, to be honest with you, and childhood. Now, you need that childhood sense of play and unself-consciousness to act. And you can't be all bollocksed up in your head when you're performing. You have to be a free-flowing being. But they've taken that idea, and I think acting teachers have intentionally perverted it into an anti-intellectualism that makes, I think, Rand a little bit incompatible with some of their with some of the ways that they look at the world.
Yeah, I find generally people don't always realize like Rand is kind of what she is. Like they've heard of her, they understand, okay, she's a novelist. Maybe some people say, oh yeah, she's a philosopher, but they don't understand that she's the enemy of everything that they consider to be ethical or whatever, because if they understood why that is, maybe they would not be pushing her away. It's kind of like the sort of the American mindset is sort of so unintegrated, if I can generalize. Like people, they're not focused enough to even hate Ayn Rand as much as we sometimes might assume. Whenever I hear people mention Ayn Rand casually, if I know them, I like to kind of bring it up to them, be like, oh, I heard you mention Ayn Rand. How big of a fan are you, or something like that? Or have you read her stuff? So is it like that when you hear someone like, who's the guy that plays himself in every movie? I know that's very general, but he's in Wedding Crashers. I really, it's just escaping me, but he's, I like him.
Oh, Wilson.
The other one.
Vince Vaughn.
That's the one. So he's a fan of The Fountainhead. If you happen to run into him, like, could that be a topic of conversation you would think of bringing up?
I've auditioned with him before, and that was not a topic of conversation. Even though I knew he had libertarian leanings at the time, I didn't think it was an appropriate thing to bring up in the middle of an audition room. As Paul probably would feel the same way going into a meeting. You don't lead with it.
Yeah, I can see that. Any other name drops that come to mind for either of you that you've heard people bring up Ayn Rand or The Fountainhead or anything like that?
I haven't specifically heard objectivism or Rand references. I remember this is the only name dropping I'll ever do because it's the only party I was ever invited to. Kurt Russell threw a party at his house years ago, and there were a bunch of important people and me there. And he was very congenial and obviously knew about libertarianism, but I wouldn't take him aside and say, did you prefer Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged? And do you think John Galt's speech could be a little bit longer and better, or anything like that?
There was a society in Hollywood for a time that was open to libertarian types and objectivist types like us because it was predominantly conservative. But it was a super secret society that became not so super secret because it was infiltrated by somebody on the left who decided to out a lot of the people who were in this organization. It was an organization started by John Voight and Gary Sinise, and who are the only folks I think are okay with being mentioned in there. There were a lot of below the line folks in there, crew folks, animators, sound folks, technical people, and who were being outed and were very concerned about losing their jobs. So that was a bit of an oasis. And I found that whenever I went to their gatherings, they used to have gatherings once a month at Barney's Beanery. As an objectivist, I was able to hold court, even though I was against many of the things that the conservatives were talking about. They were actually interested and listening. And I think in some ways, we were gaining converts in that world.
Think about the subtext of what Mark is saying. There's a secret group of conservatives who have to meet. And when they're outed, it's the death of the organization, and it could be challenges to the jobs of the people who participated. You could argue that the philosophy of a writer matters on a film or TV show because theoretically, the film or TV show is going to be about something that would perhaps reflect his values. But God loves cinematographers and DPs because they're incredibly important and certainly more talented than I am. Who cares? In what world would it matter who they're going to vote for? It doesn't. It's the demonization of everything that is not the left. And if this would happen, so go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, how do you compare this, say, to the 1950s and 40s when there was a virulent and, in my opinion, justified anti-communist sentiment, and that bled over into Hollywood in a way where people who had those sentiments, some of whom were writing these sentiments into productions and were being controlled by the Communist Party, no doubt, I mean, one of the complaints Kazan made was that the communists in the Soviet Union were attempting to control the content of what he was producing, and he wanted to be independent of that. So it was a real threat. But the sort of character, it's hard for me to say character assassination because these people really did advocate for something that's really disgusting and evil, but it's the same kind of phenomenon that we see against conservatives, don't you think?
I completely agree, and I agree with your characterization of what the communist sympathizers were doing back then. I think it was disgusting. One of the challenges is that I believe in freedom of association and freedom of contract. So I believe that the people who hire me have the right not to hire me, or, depending upon the contract, to fire me depending upon my political views, if assuming that they make me financially whole. That's a separate question from whether or not it's the right thing to do. It's an insane thing to do. It's crazy. You don't demonize half of the population. By the way, our values are much closer to the values of the founding fathers than the current values are. So if anybody has strayed from the true path, I think you could hardly argue that it's the libertarians and perhaps the conservatives amongst us who are doing that. I think the onus is on the liberals to make their case, and they failed to make it for, I don't know, 100 years, whenever progressive.
I'm gonna make a presumption here and claim that I'm speaking for Rucka. I don't like to call them liberals because I think they're illiberal. So I just call them the left now. I think liberalism is what both sides have lost. I mean, the conservatives were supposed to be defending and protecting liberalism, right? If the idea of conservatism is to preserve the status quo, well, the unique status quo of America is classical liberalism, which the right let go, and the left abandoned it over 100 years ago. And the right let go because the left was more consistent in its moral values.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The current one that gets me, and it's obviously not new, is progressive. The idea of attaching the word progress to something that wants to send us back to villages and to everybody owning everybody else and to a lack of freedom. It's hilarious and insulting and disgusting simultaneously, which is quite a hat trick.
Well, Mark, not only may you speak for me, but I would like you to play me in the biopic written by Paul someday.
Nice.
Yes, but I want to come back to this Friends of Abe, a secret society of non-leftists that I think.
You named it.
Oh, I didn't.
That's okay. I think it's over. So it's
hold
over.
on. I'll let Barney's know the meeting is off. But so it was created by Andrew Breitbart, from what I know, and I'm curious if they did. They still do meet. If you were to go, I have been invited, but I didn't want to go because of the people I knew were going to be there. I'm curious if you were to attend now, both of you, if you would feel at home the way it's gone. I mean, the non-left has very much filled with people who also want to take us back to the farm, people who hate big tech, big pharma, who very much think immigration and abortion are the most important issues of our time. So I wonder if the synopsis I'm hearing is a little bit outdated. I could be that what I'm alluding to would be wrong if you were to go, but I'm suggesting it may have changed in a way that would make you not even be
the synopsis of FOA.
The synopsis of FOA.
Friends of
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think the right reacts. They don't initiate anything really. The left has initiated a very polarizing worldview, and the right is responding by coalescing into its particular tribes that hold, specific values that I think are very anti-liberal as well. And they're sort of coalescing around those issues in opposition to the left. And you're right. I mean, Trump has sort of been the catalyst for all this in a way. And it's very possible that some people on the right that I might have thought, 6 years ago still had their minds and wits about them, may have lost them at this point. So I might not. I think I would still find a home there in the sense that people would still listen to reason. Enough people would, but there's going to be those who have given up the ghost entirely for the nationalism, white nationalism. I think that is starting to take precedence in that side of the aisle.
Which kind of reminds us that at the end of the day, it's just kind of about presenting something positive. That is Ayn Rand and her philosophy. So alliances may at times be appropriate, but at the end of the day, that's not the end goal. I'm reminded of a scene in The Little Rascals where the one
isn't, when talking about Rand, who is not reminded of a scene in The Little Rascals?
Exactly. So the one guy with the yarmulke, he wears a beanie. What's that? I forget his name, but
I've got the poster on the wall and I don't remember his name. I'm sorry.
He's talking to Alfalfa, and Alfalfa admits he likes girls. Imagine admitting that. In Hollywood. No, I'm joking. But the guy with the beanie says, "I know you like girls, Alfalfa, but the problem is rules are rules." And Alfalfa answers, "Well, why do we have to be a club over hating something? Can't we be a club because we like something?" And, at the end of the day, I would say that message can be abstracted and carried with us to various ventures, including, how is objectivism going to, be spread? It's not going to be by being anti-left. It may require a lot of leftist bashing, but at the end of the day, it needs to be about something positive, which is self-contained. So isn't that nice?
Yeah, totally. We have to present a narrative that is incredibly compelling. I mean, Mark and I were talking previously about Robert Bidinato is the guy who wised me up to the importance of narrative in changing people's minds. He wrote a piece maybe 20 years ago about the environmentalist movement. And he saw that it was more than a bunch of people who wanted to do well by trees. And he looked at the philosophy behind it. And I thought, holy crap, this makes sense to me, that there's a coherent narrative that these people have that people who oppose them do not necessarily have. We have to present a compelling narrative. One of the functions of art, and God knows it's not the only function, but one of them is to inspire and perhaps to lead and to suggest alternative ways of doing things and to present images that kids look up to and want to become. When I was a kid, there was reruns of a series called Adventures of Superman. And George Reeves played a guy he was sort of like your dad in a way, both as Clark Kent and as Superman. He had an unassailable instinct to do the right thing. And he was not constantly questioning himself about doing the right thing. And he was generally doing the right thing, stopping bad guys from committing murders and crimes and things like that. So that was a show that I think was in the 50s and was rerun in the 60s. In 1978, the Superman comes out with Christopher Reeve, no relation to George Reeves. And it's an unapologetic, unironic presentation of heroism and dignity. And there's a moment when Lois Lane is questioning him about something. And he says, "Lois, I never lie." And it's just totally straightforward. And in 1978, that was a fairly revolutionary thing to say after the 60s and the early 70s and so on. Now it brings a lump in my throat to even think of a time when you would say that on film and it would inspire kids. The notion that it is good to do right and that, you might for a second consider to do wrong, but then you'd laugh it off and do the right thing. I compare that to the recent iterations of Superman in films, to the Zack Snyder films, where Superman hates himself, hates the fact that he's got powers, is torn up inside. And my feeling is this: there are absolutely heroes and superheroes who can be angsty and ridden with doubt. I think Batman is a perfect one for that. There's a reason they call him the Dark Knight. I've got no problem with a Batman with a huge interior life. To give that type of interior life to a Superman is to try to destruct the symbol that so many of us looked up to as kids. The whole thing about Superman was aspirational. Who doesn't want to fly? Who doesn't want to have superior strength? And who doesn't want to look good in tights? It's the perfect kind of situation. But now you've got somebody who is bemoaning those very things that the rest of us, when we were kids, looked up to and wanted. You're going, why would you do this? This isn't an accident. It's not, you don't misunderstand Superman. You decide this is the wrong icon. I'm going to do something to him. So we have to do the opposite of that. We've got to fight those negative portrayals of positive icons. And we've also got to fight the icons like the misunderstanding of Robin Hood in popular culture, Shylock and the evil of money and the evil of lending and the evil of business. Oh God, there's another S that just left my head. But the Scrooge is the other one. The artists in large part throughout history, from the little that I know, have not been philosophically on our side. I mean, objectivism didn't exist until Rand brought it into existence, but they have looked at, say, the dark side of the Industrial Revolution, when many more people were kept alive because of the Industrial Revolution than would ever have lived before, and focused on the hours that the kids were working, as opposed to you're alive. There's a huge difference between being dead of starvation and being alive. And is it great to work weekends? Is it great to work 12-hour days? Is it great to do that when you're a kid? No. Is it better than being dead? Yeah, probably. There's no contextual reasoning. It's like the same type of thinking that calls America a racist nation. If we are, I wish the rest of the world were as racist as we were, because then the whole world would be in a far better place than it was. Are we perfect? Of course not. And there's things about our current version of the country that, that I can't stand. But losing that context seems to me crazy. The whole notion of cancel culture. Let's take a time machine to the past and let us castrate the parts of it that we no longer agree with. Even if those parts are unpleasant or wrong or even evil by today's standards, how about we leave history alone? We can comment on it. Of course we can. We can, of course, say what we find objectionable in the past. But the idea of getting rid of it so that other people not have access to it, there's a 4-letter word for that. And it starts with E, and the other 3 letters are vil.
Well, yeah, and Nathaniel Branden wrote a book called The Disowned Self, that it really is about non-integration in a person, and you can extrapolate that idea of disowning information or parts of our history instead of integrating them, incorporating them into what we know, and how if it's unhealthy in an individual psyche, it's likely unhealthy in the social psyche as well. But I wanted to push back a little bit because on your concepts that I fully agree with, but I feel like we have 2 poles here. We have one side that we will loosely define as the left in the artistic world that likes to focus on the underbelly of things and say, this is true. And we have the other side that has a more of a Pollyanna vision that says, well, we need heroism, and heroism is just as true in its own ways, even if the characters, purity is not achieved in life, it's still something that we need to look up to. Aspirationalism is good, which I agree with too. Now, do you think there's any place for this naturalism? I mean, the films of the 60s and particularly the 70s gave us sort of the anti-hero and dirty stories where you really got to know the hero was sort of in your plane of action. Like, for example, the revisionist history that started around there as well showed us founders who were not, I mean, it was the intention to knock them off their pedestals as demigods, but it also showed us men who were men. They had flaws, but they did great things. Now, do you think an integration of the two is great? Is even preferable?
I think you've got to have both. Yeah, in my call for inspirational figures, I'm not denying the importance of non-inspirational figures. You don't want a steady diet of Superman. You want everything. I grew up on the movies of the 60s and 70s. There's not a one of them that I would wish out of existence. There are movies that violently offend me on a philosophical plane that are great movies and that I might revisit again and again because of the acting, because of the writing, whatever. Because
any that you can give us now as a concrete example?
Taxi Driver was one that really grew on me over time. The first time I saw it, I thought I was at a speech that Ray Bradbury gave, and he said, "Why are we focusing on this human cockroach?" And there is 50% of me that completely agrees. Why are we focusing on this human cockroach? There's another 50% that's going, but this guy's fascinating. He doesn't have to be typical of something. He doesn't have to stand for something. As long as he is not presented as aspirational, and he actually is not in the film, we can enjoy one of the greatest performances in film history. Fantastic cinematography, fantastic score by Bernard Herrmann, great work by Jodie Foster and everybody else. So as a work of art, even though that's not what I want to do, I don't have any problem with naturalism and realism. What I want is also a space for something that is other than that, for something that is heightened. To me, you can have Inherit the Wind can coexist with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, can coexist with Superman, and my head doesn't fry, it doesn't blow apart. They're all giving me something different. And again, not everything has to be, hey, the world's great, ignore the bad stuff. You could do tons of stuff that focuses on the bad stuff, but don't take one of the very few unalloyed, unruined symbols of purity and fuck with that. There's enough other ways to do that. Do it with Batman. Batman has that kind of built-in sort of dark thing where he's reacting to the murder of his parents. And this guy's been arguably, he's been traumatized, as who wouldn't be, since then, and he's put his powers in a certain way. That's not the Superman story. So don't mess with Superman.
That's right. And those people are not aspiration. They tear down aspiration, and Superman is a American icon. I mean, uniquely in what he said, truth, justice, in the American way.
Yeah.
He was an immigrant that took on American values completely and totally, and embodied them. And it's something that people want to tear down today. So
it's a great immigrant story. I think Siegel and Schuster, who created him, were both Canadian. They were Jewish Canadians, kind of the outsider perspective. This is tangential, but I'm fascinated by characters who are torn between two worlds, because he comes from Krypton, but he's raised in Kansas on a farm. Hercules is another character. He's a demigod. So his dad is Zeus, who's a god, and his mom is not a god. Mr. Spock, half Vulcan, half human. Kwai Chang Caine, half Chinese, half American. There's something about these people who live simultaneously in two worlds, who can comment on both worlds, see the differences between them, and yet kind of bring them together in their own character. That for me is just great stuff.
And I think the woke generation would only see that David Carradine was not Chinese, and would bitch on that. Because he can't comment on that world, nor can the writers of Kung Fu.
Right. And the fact that he's half Chinese means that no Chinese person should play the character either, because what about that other half?
Well, so what they do now is they redefine, because of the importance of philosophy, they end up redefining. So Superman is for, truth, justice, and the American way. Well, we can put away American way, but justice means something to the left. It means something to the social justice warriors. Very different. It means equity, so to speak, take from the rich and give to the poor and all of that. But speaking of living in two different worlds, Paul, you worked on WWE. That's got to be, look, speaking as someone who's very much, who's into over the top, what some would call trashy entertainment. Is it weird? Are people right to think it's weird that you can be so inspired? And this kind of brings up what I think you were saying. It's like you can love romantic realism, but also really be into other types of art. So when it comes to WWE, it's like a late 20th century, early 20th century type of art that would confuse past generations. What's it like? Is there any sort of conflict or anything that sort of comes to mind?
To me, a couple of things going on. I think it's possible in comedy to love low comedy and middle comedy, I would call it, and high comedy. I can love Woody Allen's classiest productions. I can love Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, 12 Chairs producers, and I can love the Three Stooges. To me, they're not exclusive. I'm not asking of the Three Stooges what I would ask of Woody Allen, and vice versa. I'm enjoying each for what they have to give. Thank God Curly was born, because my life would be nothing without Curly. And it's not much with Curly. Similarly, with WWE, when I was a kid, I discovered pro wrestling in San Francisco, which is where I grew up. And I was very young, and I knew intellectually that the ends of the matches were predetermined, but emotionally, I was able to put that aside while I was watching the matches. For a lot of people,
what?
Mark is a mark.
This is scripted?
Well, not when I got there. It wasn't.
The word mark actually means a wrestling fan that doesn't know it's fake.
Right. So it's perfect, Mark. Yeah. So there was a figure named Rocky Johnson in the San Francisco territory. He was a guy who was like 6'2", 265, pure muscles, who could leap over the top rope into the ring, do the Muhammad Ali boxing shuffle, launch himself into 3 simultaneous drop kicks to the head of his opponent, and pin him. To me, it was the real world version of Superman, that somebody could do that. It was like an athlete, a gymnast, a strongman, a technical wrestler all in one. So I fell in love with that. I fell in love with the morality play, because in the 70s, wrestling had very clear-cut good guys and very clear-cut bad guys. And there were very few people in between. That changed around the Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels era. Vince McMahon thought that the audience was no longer interested in good guys and bad guys. So you'd have guys who were, 53% bad guy and guys who were 53% good guy. Everybody kind of met in the middle. Financially, it clearly worked. For me, it loses some of the appeal of it, which is it's a morality play. I really want to see the good guy beat the crap out of the bad guy. So I carried this affection for wrestling with me into adulthood. And I had the opportunity I was pitching a wrestling project to WWE Films, and the guy I was pitching to is no longer with the company because unfortunately he's dead. Was very patient, listened to it, said, that's a great pitch. Of course, we're not doing wrestling films. And I thought, how stupid am I? I actually went to WWE Films, and I thought that would be a place to do a wrestling film. But they said, our ratings are having certain problems. This was years ago. Would you be interested in talking to Stephanie McMahon about coming to work for Raw and SmackDown? And I said yes. And they flew me out to Connecticut, and I met with Stephanie, and then I met with Vince and everybody, and I pitched them what I would do, which of course they didn't do, which is their right. But to me, it's wrestling at its worst is horrible. It's indefensible. It's bad. I'm not a fan of death matches where people are bleeding all over the ring and their carotid arteries are spewing red matter and stuff like that. At their best, they are a combination. They're a rare art form / sport where you're telling in almost kabuki theater terms with your body, with no dialogue except for what you say before and after you go in the ring. You're telling a story with the character that you've created who can do certain things and can't do other things. And sometimes you're telling stories like Rocky, of perseverance, of somebody overcoming great odds. When I saw Rocky as a kid, I'd never been a boxing fan in my life. I was aware of boxing, but it meant nothing to me. I go see Rocky and I'm going, if boxing were like that, you couldn't get me away from boxing because it's a morality tale. It's the story of the arrogant guy on top who takes for granted his greatness and assumes that he's going to drop the other guy because he's got natural God-given inborn talent. And the other guy just works hard. The other guy just wants it. Who cares about working hard? Who cares about wanting it? I have the same feeling about mixed martial arts today. I'm a huge UFC fan. And part of the fun for me is looking at people who are incredibly naturally talented and can do almost anything and putting them against people who have modest talents at best, who will not stop, who it's just so important to them to win, to their self-image, to their idea of the sacrifice they put into what they owe their family or their coaches, whatever. That to me is fascinating. That's the best kind of human drama. You've got two people voluntarily in a battle between two approaches, the naturally gifted and the people who want it and are willing to work for it and will do whatever it takes within the rules to achieve it. These are compelling to me. It's compelling in the same way a movie is compelling or a TV show is compelling. So I don't have what I would call guilty pleasures. I mean, I totally get that most of the world would laugh at wrestling, and God love them, they're welcome to. I totally get why they would, But other parts of me are going,
even Jack Black. Jack Black is a guilty pleasure for me.
Okay, Jack Black's a guilty pleasure. Yeah. But yeah, I think, there are things to embrace at the so-called top of the entertainment / artistic spectrum and things to embrace at the bottom. Something is not bad because it's lowbrow. It's bad because it's bad. I'm going to really shut up for a while.
No, that's great. No. That's a great distinction that people don't make enough. And I think it's great that you clarified it. I think, Paul, you and I were separated at birth somehow. I think we're twins, at least we're mentally and philosophically. What were you going to say,
younger,
Rucka?
better looking twin.
Oh shit! Yeah, wait till you see the new show coming out.
Okay.
I'm glad we can bring the two of you together again. By the way, Christopher in the regular chat, not the super chat, says Spanky is the name of the kid with the beanie yarmulke looking thing in Little Rascals. That, of course, that's right. But then
he's always the lead. Why would I remember that?
Right. Yeah. But then we do have some super chats to read. Lucky Charms with $100.
Lucky Charms.
Lucky Charms.
Always Lucky Charms.
Lucky Charms. Have you seen me, Lucky Charms? I sure have. The only thing I would rather work on more than WWE would be like kids' cereal commercials. That would be just the ultimate of outrageous fun, I think. Sammy is bored again with, thank you for the super chat. Thank you, Christopher, for the super chat. Phil asks, don't actors have to be precise in their thought processes to be true to what the writers have authored?
I mean, I think the really good actors are precise and logical about their approach, but it's for some it's accidental. They just intuitively grasp stuff. They wouldn't articulate it as their mind is grasping it. They'd articulate it as logic is sort of something that feels right to them.
All right. Sammy and Christopher, thank you for the additional super chats. Thank you, Jonathan Honig, for the $9.99. Thank you, Theme Master, for the super chat. Thank you, Apollo Zeus, for the 10 pounds. Thank you, Luis, for the 4 pounds. Thank you, Sammy's board again. And Phil is back with 5 pounds, saying, I have met and known Superman without lies and wheelchairs and with brain damage, but is still more heroic than average politicians. Ain't that the truth? And thank you, Sammy, again. And thank you, Regina, for the €5. She says, thanks for this great combo. Speaking of, negative depictions of businessmen and bankers in movies, Paul, listen, you're my favorite guest, I think, ever, but we've got a little bit of a bone to pick, or a wishbone, as I think the dog was named in Little Rascals. So there is a scene that I've been unable to believe how it made it into the Little Rascals all these years. And it blows my mind that I'm finally able to speak to one of the writers. I don't know if you worked on this scene specifically, but Mel Brooks is a banker. He's reading a loan application, hardworking man, 7 children, needs this money or he will, lose everything. Loan denied. Then 2 Hasidic Jews walk in, which is really the boys dressed up as them, but nonetheless, he sees 2 Hasidic Jews walk in, and Mel Brooks goes, oh, have a seat, man. Yes, what can I do for you? Oh, you need a loan? Yeah, sure. What's your account number? What exactly is going on in that scene? Jesus Christ. But I know it's comedy, but it is a kid's movie. Isn't it kind of planting a certain kind of view of bankers and maybe the power that Jews have in the financial world? I don't know. Do you remember that scene?
I faintly. We wrote the script in 12 days. The situation was Universal had
Wow.
the rights. The rights were about to expire, and they said, you've got 12 days to convince us to make the movie, basically, because the previous script they didn't like for whatever reason. So we were on the lot for 12 days, turning 10 pages a night, basically, into the director and getting feedback the next day. I don't have a lot to say about that, except this may or may not be interesting. As I recall, the second half of the scene was cut, because in the second half of the scene, the Rascals return, because Mel Brooks gets over on them in this scene. And the whole point of the Rascals is no adult gets over on the Rascals. The Rascals have the last word because of their innocence and humor and working together and so on. So we've written the conclusion of that scene, or when they return the next day or whatever, when they do to him what he tried to do to them. So the notion was that he was being bad at doing what he was doing, but I cannot defend the portrayal of bankers in that film. So you got me there. And I apologize retrospectively.
The Jewish element is kind of what blows my mind. Like, oh, is this like a propaganda film from the scary times? But I understand also sometimes you're just trying to write a script and you're not thinking about you're like, is this funny? Yes, it is. Does this work? Is it, it's like you're not thinking of it in terms of what messages.
Wait a minute.
Go ahead,
so you mean all the problems in society are not because of Jewish bankers or a Jewish cabal?
You are learning a lot of new things today.
I am being blown away by the information in this show.
I have to say, in my defense, none of us knew that Mel Brooks was Jewish. So,
I wish he would bring it up more often. Really,
that was a surprise.
All right, well, so about Liar Liar. Now, there's a movie that I think really shows that dishonesty doesn't pay. Liar Liar. Did you write it for Jim Carrey, or did that have nothing to do with you?
No, I had come up with the idea in 1990, and my then partner and I pitched it to 9 different companies, and they all turned it down for various reasons. One company said, we've got 2 liar projects in development. Another said, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if the lead were 5 years old? And we're thinking, well, it would be an idea. I'm not sure I would characterize it as a good one. And then 4 years later, we're in a general meeting at Imagine, and we're pitching to one of the lieutenants there, and he says, Brian Grazer has an idea for a film about a liar. And we're full of piss and vinegar, and we said, don't tell us his idea, let us tell you our idea. So we pitch our idea, and the executive likes it. He says, Brian's not here, but when he comes back, we'll tell him your idea. We're going, yeah, that's going to happen. Because we've been in hundreds of meetings and nothing ever happens in meetings. That's the purpose of a meeting, is for things not to happen. You can all get together and waste time in the same area. So we're in the hallway getting our parking validated, which is the high point of the day for us. And we see Brian Grazer go by at 80 miles an hour with a bad haircut. And we see him behind the glass doors talking to the executive that we just pitched. And he sticks his head out in the hallway and says, do you guys have a minute? And we figure, it's the head of Imagine. We just got our parking validated. Sure, we'll give you a minute. So we go into his office and he sits down. He says, tell me your idea. And we said, well, it's about a liar. He pounds the desk twice, says, I love it. I love it. What does the liar do? We said, well, we think he's a lawyer. He said, I love it. I love it. We're going to make this movie. And I've told Mark this story. It's like, are you sure? Because we could talk you out of this. If you just let us talk like 5 more minutes, we can get you to turn that green light into a flashing red. And he decides to make the movie. And no, Jim Carrey was not in our plans. We always thought of Tom Hanks and Steve Martin when we came up with the idea. There's another actor, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention his name, but he was a well-known romantic comedy actor, very talented man, who was circling the project and we thought was going to pull the trigger. He had a controversy erupt in his personal life, which became a public controversy, and he backed off the project. And we're speculating that he didn't want to look like a liar at that point in his life, didn't want to play a liar. So we've just lost our potential star. So Brian Grazer gets the script that weekend to Jim Carrey, who's about to do The Truman Show. But apparently the Truman Show screenplay is not finished at that point, and Jim's not happy. And he reads our screenplay and he commits to doing it. So that's how it happened. And we had been told by Imagine, we went through 5 drafts with them, and which is typical, that's not unusual. And they started out by saying, this is really funny, it's really broad, we need to kind of rein it in, we need to make it more personal, up the emotional stakes and get rid of the broad humor. So we did that for 3 drafts. Then they hired Jim Carrey. It's like, wow. Okay, so, it's like, now we need some big comedy here. Can you guys do broad comedy? Oh, no, not us. We only do the narrow kind of comedy that we've rewritten this into. So it's that kind of thing where, and it was, we were lucky that we wound up with him. I went to a couple days of shooting, and I was telling Mark, I was there during one of the courtroom scenes. He was so devoted to getting the best he could out of himself. He would do the take again and again and again. He would think, I can do it better, I can do it differently. I would, sometimes we would recognize the dialogue coming out of his mouth, sometimes not. Sometimes you get a verb and a noun in the same sentence that you had written as dialogue, sometimes not. But just watching his dedication, you think, if anybody deserves 20 million, he's certainly working for it.
Yeah,
I love him. I think he's great.
Yeah.
I think you, along with the Truman Show producers, might have saved Jim Carrey from being a Pauly Shore, from just being kind of like a forgettable 90s outrageous comedy guy. He definitely transitioned in that movie and in Truman Show into something very much more kind of diverse and probably respected.
Spotless Mind too. Yes, Spotless Mind.
A couple years later, but yes, absolutely.
It's a fascinating career because you're starting out with the kind of rubber-faced comedian, and that's what you know him for, being wild and crazy. Getting to where he can do Man in the Moon and Spotless, Eternal Sunshine, it's like that. That's great range. Being able to do that really convincingly at the extreme dramatic and the extreme comedic ends of the spectrum. That's my hat's off to him. And
don't forget Cable Guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people have, but I think it's underrated. It's okay. Final liar question. Did you write the line, "Yeah, in your bra"?
I don't remember. I got to tell you, it's been a number of years, and my partner and I went through multiple drafts. So anything good, I'm sure, was written by whoever else I was working with at the time.
That's humble of you to say. Okay, so all right. Well, yeah, that movie definitely, Liar, definitely. It conveys that, honesty is the best policy, and it brings people closer to you. It brings trust, especially your own self-confidence, self-esteem, the way you see yourself. So you can get Jim Carrey, you can get all Hollywood, cream of the crop to work on a movie like that. You don't have to convince them that, A is A and all of that. It speaks to their values on some level, and as it does with the audience. So that's definitely, I think, a way that the culture is going to be changed for the most part. It's kind of reaching people's values in a way that kind of like meeting them where they are. So I think Liar is a wonderful example of how the culture can be affected without trying to go to battle on these sort of points of contention.
Well, thank you very much for saying that.
Well, no problem. Regina with the super chat. Thank you for that. So I guess we can call it a wrap. This has been a wonderful episode. I'll remind the audience again, when Alfalfa was talking to Spanky, he asks, why do we have to be a club because we hate something? Can't we be a club because we like something? Ask yourselves, am I motivated by something positive, or am I just motivated by hatred of the negative? And that, my friends, is all I have to say. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Paul. This has been a wonderful discussion. I hope it's the first of multiple. We are going to jump over to Clubhouse now. Paul, my understanding is you're not on Clubhouse, but if any of you want to keep the discussion going there, join us on Clubhouse now. The Daily Objective will be back here same time tomorrow. And I don't have any other notes. Please become an Ayn Rand Center UK member to help this thing grow. And especially this week, you can revive the Jocko Willink book study with Nikos Sotirakopoulos. Thank you all. Thank you for the super chats. And